The chugging of the steam engine synced with the racing of Rilla Staub's heart. She hadn't been home for 8 years. Her parents had sent her to a prestigious boarding school for girls in France, where she'd not long ago graduated as a governess. She was eager to reconnect with the mother who had doted on her as a child. She'd understood the words, "for your protection," and that her parents had believed they needed to send her away. Nevertheless, she couldn't suppress the resentment she felt every time she thought about the months of loneliness she'd endured. Alone at 10, in a foreign land where she could barely understand the language. Rilla had been taught French as a child. Still, at such a tender age, she wasn't prepared for the speed at which Parisians spoke, nor their fashion and the totality of the foreign environment. Until then, she'd never left the security of the establishment owned by her mother and the place where she was born. She looked at the faces of her parents in her locket and sighed, tucking it back safely under her collar. Would they still look the same? Did she even care? Children needed their parents, and she had been without hers for too long. She didn't know if it was possible to maintain a certain level of closeness to people she only had a relationship with through the exchange of letters. She couldn't rightly say how she felt about what she termed her abandonment. Even as the engine slowed, her heart maintained its momentum. She fanned her face with a gloved hand. She was here, and when she stepped off the train, she would once again be entering the unknown. Paris was now her home. She knew where everything was and how to get around. She mopped the perspiration from her brow. Her memories of Boston were through the eyes of a child who had barely been allowed outside the door. She didn't know much then, and she knew even less now. She rose to collect her carpetbag. Her trunks were in the baggage compartment, and she'd been assured she would be reunited with them on the platform. The train jerked to a halt, throwing her into the arms of a passing passenger. "Begging your pardon, ma'am." He tilted his hat after setting her right. He smelled of sandalwood, vanilla, and other old spices with an undertone of carbolic. Not the flowery cologne used by the men in France. There was something masculine about the scent of this man. Their eyes locked for no more than a second, but that's all it took for the steel in his cold, gray eyes to suck the air right out of her lungs, mingling with the humidity of the day and the stuffiness of the train. Her hand flew to her chest as the thumping of her heart vibrated mercilessly through her fingers. His eyes traveled over her briefly. He tipped his hat once more and turned to leave the train.